Hey guys, this is Jan Gustafsson for Chess24. In this video I'm going to take a look at the game Veselin Topalov against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave played in the 5th round of the Sinquefield Cup. Now of course this game does not involve Fabiano Caruana, who has 5 out of 5, and it does not involve Magnus Carlsen. So it is not the top story of the day, but I do believe it is quite an instructive game and you can learn something from it by paying close attention. Not from me, but from the game. So the players: former world champion Veselin Topalov lost his first 2 games in the tournament, then got a losing position against Hikaru Nakamura in the 3rd round, but got lucky in that one, turned it around and won the game. Followed up by drawing in my opinion, pretty good game from the black side against Magnus Carlsen, where he was very precise and clearly has found his step a little bit. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, his opponent, the Frenchman, the French #1, bit of a newcomer to this very level, certainly hasn't disappointed before this game. He was on 50%. He won a very good game against Levon Aronian, got killed in the opening by Fabiano Caruana, and today, as we can see by the diagram over there, bit of a spoiler, he lost and is on -1, while Veselin Topalov made it back to 50%. So let's see how he did it. He started with e4, and Vachier is going to play the Najdorf in this game, his main weapon. Of course, we know, the older viewers will remember, Topalov, one of the main experts in the Najdorf, beat pretty much everybody who's anybody 10 years ago with both colors in the Najdorf. So he's not a man you want to choose his opening against lightly. But Vachier, understandably, was not all that happy repeating the Caro-Kann, where he got crushed by Mr. Fabiano Caruana, or Mr. Perfect, or the Fabulous, or Fabi, whatever you want to call him. Knight to f6, knight c3, a6. Topalov chooses the move f3. This move has pretty much replaced bishop e3 as one of the main lines, because after bishop e3, knight g4, white really hasn't been getting anywhere. So nowadays they try to play f3 first, and then bishop e3 without being molested by knight to g4. e5, knight b3, bishop e6. I'm not a huge specialist on the Najdorf, so we'll be quick in the opening. This is one of the very main lines: bishop e3, bishop e7, queen d2, short castles, long castles. And black goes for the move a5. Not the main line here. The main line is the move knight bd7, which has been played thousands of times, but a5 is also quite a well-established move. Looks a bit weird at first sight. The idea is to keep pushing this pawn and creating weaknesses in the white queen side if he tries to stop it. He does stop it quite radically by playing a4, which has kind of become the main line here. They used to play moves like bishop b5 in the old days as well. But a4 has become the main move. And this establishes a bit of the topic of the game already. As we can see, the b5 square is quite permanently weakened. And the topic of this game will be the light squares, especially in the black camp. But for now, we're still in theoretical territory. Knight to a6, g4, knight to b4, king b1. All of this has been seen before. Vachier played the move queen to c7, rook to c8 is the other more popular move here. Queen to c7. And we can see that even though it's opposite colored castles, we're not going to see a very sharp fight full of sacrifices, most likely. Black finds it very hard to open the queen side. He can't really get in b5, and it's hard to make progress there. But his pieces are well placed, controlling the center at the moment. White, similarly, is going to find it quite difficult to launch a full-scale attack on the king side, because so many office pieces are stuck doing battle on the queen side or in the center. Instead, the battle most likely will resolve around the d5 square and take a more positional nature. And we will get quite a masterclass from Topalov how to win that fight. g5, knight h5. Knight to h5 is a very common move in these structures, stopping this pawn from advancing and also eyeballing this f4 square, which could be a juicy landing spot. Bishop to b5. Not the most popular move. All of this is still theory. Rook g1 has been played a bit more. But this still has been seen. Rook ac8 and rook g1 is officially the novelty. But once again, the structure doesn't really change because of it. Now Vachier embarks on the quite typical break f5. As mentioned, he can't really make happen that much on the queen side, so he tries to activate his piece on the king side, and he tries to bring this rook into the action by opening the f-file. At the expense, of course, of slightly weakening his king, because he also opened the g-file for the white rook. Gf, knight takes f6, queen to g2. And here, I believe, Vachier committed his first inaccuracy of the game. He played the move knight to h5. This move has the good effect that it stops queen to g7 checkmate, but it has a problem that once again it places the knight on the rim, which we've learned is not a thing you normally want to do. Of course, it's not that black and white. The knight is also controlling the f4 square and opening up this file for the rook, but I believe the lack of control over the d5 square weighs more heavily here, and that he should have played the move g6 instead of it, or even the move rook to f7. But I prefer g6. I think the weakening of the king side is not that serious. So he went knight h5, and Topalov embarked on an instructive maneuver. His knight on b3 isn't really doing anything, so he's trying to bring it into the game, played knight c1, bishop f6, and knight to d3. And here, Captain Hindsight that I am, I do feel like Vachier committed another, even more serious inaccuracy by taking on d3. The problem is that this knight on d3, even though it has been improved, didn't really partake in the fight for the central squares. In fact, it was blocking the rook. And by exchanging it, a lot of these problems are solved for white. After knight takes d3, rook takes d3, we can see that d5 square now really is lacking some defenders, and some more will disappear shortly. So I believe after knight d3, it was important for black to keep this knight on the board, go knight c6 back, introducing the option of creating his own play by playing knight to d4. In worst case scenario, this knight can always jump back to b4 or jump to e7 to control that good old d5 square. So knight takes d3, I believe, is a mistake. Rook takes d3 and knight to f4. This is consistent, exchanging more pieces, but once again he's exchanging a piece that is not doing battle on the light squares. After bishop takes f4, e takes f4, black has opened up his own bishop, which is nice, but he's eliminated all the defenders he had for the light squares. After knight to d5, now he has to give up his bishop. Bishop takes, rook takes d5, and we get the position that will dominate the rest of the game, or the structure that will dominate the rest of the game, with the opposite colored bishops. There's a very important lesson to be learned here. A lot of people believe opposite colored bishops are boring, drawish, all the endings will be a draw. Well, all the endings might be a draw. This is not the case at all with heavy pieces on the board, and here we get plenty of them. The fuller the board is, the more the opposite colored bishops actually favor the side who's attacking, who has the initiative, or who can use the squares where his bishop can operate. And here we see there's a lot of light square holes in the dark camp. Look at the squares d5, b5, e6, d7, f5, g4, h3, less important. There is a lot of weaknesses which black can't really cover. Well, his bishop looks nice and active too, but after white went c3, white has pretty decent control over the dark squares, and he will have virtually an extra piece to operate on the light squares. So I believe Vachier misjudged this position quite a bit by allowing this, especially going for the move knight takes d3, and from here on it's really suffering and watching a class of Topalov and how to exploit it. Bishop e5, c3, impeding this bishop, rook f6, queen f2, b6, some maneuvering, bishop a6, rook b8, bishop d3. Now this b5 square is freed for the rook, king h8, rook to b5, rook to f7. We can already see black's moves don't look that purposeful, and that's because he doesn't have a really constructive plan. He can only sit and wait while white improves his position. Once again, his lack of play on the dark squares is to be blamed for it, and his strategic decisions, which he took earlier. h4, always useful to create a bit of a nuisance by threatening to push this h-pawn up the board. Queen a7, another move that does not really look all that active. Queen c2, bringing the queen over. We can already see the queen is now controlling this important diagonal and has some juicy landing spots, especially on e6. Rook to c5, at the very least, Vachier managed to exchange one pair of rooks, whereas troubles continue and white still has enough major pieces to generate an attack. Rook to f8, h5 was played, and I believe it was in this position where Vachier missed his last chance to stay in the game. I think he had to play the move queen to f7 to fight against his active white queen, or at the very least exchange it if it doesn't want to retreat. I guess he did not go for it because he considered this ending to be hopeless, or at the very least very bad. While it is quite bad, I believe it was the best chance he had. King to a2, it is unpleasant because the white king will walk up the board, and it's not going to be easy to keep the rook locked out either. It has this entry into the black position. But I still believe he had to try this and try to defend this position, which does not strike me as a hopeless task. In general, as the defender, you want to get rid of as many pieces as possible to exploit the drawish tendencies of the opposite colored bishops once the pieces disappear. So after h5, he played the move queen c7 instead. King a2. Topalov is in no hurry. He just improves his king for a later ending if it's needed. Wants to put it on b3, also eliminating sacrifices on c3. Queen d8, queen to g4, queen back, king to b3, rook to c8, hinting at bishop takes c3, but it's not really a threat yet. And Topalov returns to e6. Note that this is not really about concrete moves. It's about the white pieces being able to maneuver a lot more freely on these light squares, and there's not all that much black can do about it. So this is really a horrible defensive task. And here Vachier called his next move a mistake. I don't think it matters all that much. The position is very, very tough to hold, and white will invade with his plan rook g5, rook f5, or with the move h6. He has the option of going bishop to c4. Vachier played queen to c5 and said he missed the move rook to g5, which pins this bishop, so there is no bishop takes c3 tricks available, and it plans to go to f5, activating the last piece that was kind of not helping the invasion on the light squares. Vachier played the move rook b8. Can't really give him good advice here. And after rook f5, he surprised many spectators with his decision here, and his decision was to resign. He called it a day. He was criticized for it because it wasn't obvious to the audience or many people watching the game online why he resigned. I don't disagree with that criticism. I think the players should be allowed to resign whenever they want. They don't do it to annoy anybody, and they're not gaining anything from it. He just considered his position to be hopeless. And I don't think he can be blamed in this particular case. The problem is the only sensible move is queen to c8. If you don't do that, white will just follow up with rook f7, h6, and deliver checkmate. So after queen to c8, white can just go for the ending. Queen rook takes, play rook f7. Black has zero counterplay. White is threatening to pick up the b pawn with rook b7. Well, if you go rook b8, trying to stop that, the king enters the battle. King to c4, let's say king g8, rook to a7, or rook to d7. Next move is king to d5, and you just can't keep this king side together while black, the queen side, sorry, while black doesn't really have any hopes for counterplay. So I do believe Vachier understandably saw no hope whatsoever anymore and called it a day. Very nice game by Topalov, even though there were no crazy tactics or sacrifices. It was very instructive which pieces he exchanged, which ones he kept on the board, especially the maneuver knight c1, knight d3. And I believe Vachier really paid a price. I'm not sure if it was inexperience in the structure, but he took some decisions which he will probably regret by going knight takes d3 and knight to f4. Should have gone knight c6. Maybe earlier he shouldn't have gone knight h5. But it was exploited with quite some precision by Veselin Topalov, who now, after starting with 2 losses all of a sudden, is in shared second place on 50%, which is enough for second place in this tournament, because Fabiano Caruana, of course, has 5 out of 5, so it's hard for anybody to have a huge score. But Topalov certainly back in it. Vachier on -1. Not a disaster at all, and he's been playing great chess in the first couple rounds. I still love having Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in a super tournament. He's always entertaining, but he did get outplayed quite badly today. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you around in the next video. Bye.